What is shaking? Another episode of the Tom Tolbert Show. It is a pleasure to welcome to the show a former assistant GM of the Giants, GM of the Dodgers, scout for the San Jose Sharks. That one still gets me every single time, Ned. It's like no one has that on their resume. No one. Ned Colletti joins us. What's going on, Ned?
Hey, good to see you, Tom. Always a pleasure. Always enjoy being on with you.
Yeah, I will get to the Sharks in just a minute,
Yeah,
but before we came on, we were talking about old time baseball and the characters that were in the game. Tommy Lasorda, Earl Weaver, who I just
yeah,
read a really good book about. I mean, he was just an absolute character. I mean, even guys who didn't go out there and really like put on the show, Sparky Anderson, Whitey Herzog. I mean, Billy Martin was one of those guys that did.
yeah.
Lee Elia, who you're a PR guy for the Cubbies. I mean, the characters back then were really unsurpassed, and I miss that. What happened to that?
I don't know where it went, but I tell you what, it was the best. And I think I was in the game for 40 years, and probably what I miss as much as anything were the conversations with that group. You could stay up till 1, 2, 3 in the morning just talking ball, talking about strategies, talking about different things. I didn't play minor league baseball, so I was at a disadvantage in some ways. But I sat at the feet of a guy like Dallas Green or Lee Elia, who just passed
Yeah,
away sadly, or Jimmy Fry, or Don Zimmer, and on and on, and then Bake in San Francisco and Felipe.
yeah.
Those days are sadly gone, but it was the best because you would learn the game. You would sit and you would learn the game, and they'd talk to you. You could learn so much by being in their company. Doesn't happen much anymore, I don't think.
Talk a little bit about, and I know, unfortunately, you just heard the news. You just got the news that Lee Elia passed away, and it's just, I mean, it's sad. Though you get older, like we're getting older. I mean, the guys that we grew up around, the guys that we grew up watching, the guys that kind of shaped our ideas of the game and opinions of the game are sadly passing away. I guess that's just how life works. But you were there for the infamous rant
Yeah.
in Chicago where. I don't think anybody's ever crushed a fan base, his own fan base, like Lee did. I've never heard a manager. I mean, you were there. I think you were in the clubhouse for
No,
that,
I wouldn't know. There
and
was
you're the
only him and the radio guy, Les Grobstein. But yeah, it was. Lee is from Philadelphia, and he was a great coach with the Phillies, 80 World Series championship team. He was their third base coach. He came to Chicago, where I grew up and where I started working for the Cubs in 1982. He was our manager, and Dallas Green was our GM. Philly guys, and just tough as could be. And the Cubs are in this. The motto was building a new tradition, because the Cubs tradition for like the last 40 years before this was brutal. So
yeah.
they had so much intensity to them, and it was a Friday afternoon, and they started games about 3 o'clock, about 8 or 9 games a season to try and get the business crowd out. We didn't have lights; lights didn't come in until August of 1988, and we had lost a game to the Dodgers. Lee Smith, probably a Hall of Fame closer, gave it up
Yeah.
at the ninth inning, and Larry Boa and Keith Moreland. The clubhouse used to be on a left field line at Wrigley Field, right by the foul pole. And they're walking down there after getting beat. And the fans, they may have had a couple of beers in them or so.
Maybe.
And they're starting to give these guys a hard time. Well, these guys were huge competitors. They were Philly, again, Phillies. Phillies were a great
Yep.
team in that era. And they started John with this, and security had to get involved and all this stuff. And Lee heard about it either secondhand or maybe just a little bit from the players. And this enterprising radio guy, Les Grobstein, had seen it unfold. And after everybody cleared out of the clubhouse, media wise, he asked Lee about it. And Lee went off. I mean, it's one of the most historic rants of all time. And it was just his competitiveness coming out. We maybe have had 8,000 people in the ballpark that day. And the radio guy comes up to me. I was doing PR at the time, and says, "Hey, Lee did this," and he plays it for me. I go, "Oh no!" And he goes, "I'm just giving you the heads up. I'm gonna have to, bleep this out. Not 80% of it, probably. I'm gonna bleep it out, but I'm gonna have to play this. It's a big deal. And so I said, all right, well, thanks for the heads up. So I tell Dallas Green. He says, tell Lee to get up here. So I call the clubhouse and get word to Lee to come up to the front office, come upstairs. And he walks by my office and he goes, I think I made a mistake. And I says, Lee, if you would have had, it was a rookie by the name of Ryan Sandberg, turned out to be a Hall of Fame player, right?
Yeah.
But if you would have had Sandberg bunt, that would have been a mistake. This this is going to live on for decades. And he went to see Dallas, and he apologized immediately, which was helpful. But this happened in 1983, and this is 2025, and it's still out there. I wouldn't advise
those
any children listening to it.
those nickel diamond cocksuckers come out here and boo the Cubs.
Oh
95% of the country has a job. The other
yeah, yeah.
5% come out here to boo our own team.
Oh yeah, it wasn't good. It wasn't good.
But the thing was, like you would never get that. I mean, you didn't get that back then, but you wouldn't even come close to getting that now. Tommy Lasorda, he would
Oh
crush his own players. And like he'd come out and say, I don't know what we were doing out there. Sachs dug himself a hole, buried himself at home plate. Garvey needed an oar to hit that pitch. It's like you don't get that kind of
no,
honesty from some of the managers. When did you, because you've been in the game a long time, when did you see that kind of start to shift? Was it the big money, more media attention, social media? It's just very buttoned up, very corporate now.
yeah,
Coaches give basically the same answers, except maybe Popovich in the NBA,
yep.
but everybody's pretty much the same, on the same page. Great for the organization, not as much if you're a consumer.
No, it is buttoned up pretty well. I think social media has a lot to do with it, and it's just a change in the game and in the personnel too. I'm not sure how if presidents of baseball ops and GMs. I'm sure Buster does it with Melvin, but how many guys in that position end up going out, sitting in a bar till closing time, talking about the game, trying to get
Yeah.
it. They're just trying to figure it out. I mean, Sabes and I, we walked probably, we'd see almost every game together. On the road, we'd walk till 3 or 4 in the morning, just dissecting it, trying to get us just a little bit better. I don't know that any of that stuff happens. Certainly not to the extent that it did. It's probably been 10 years or so, maybe a little bit more, that it's changed. Sometimes, the game has been, outside of my family and my faith, it's been the primary thing in my career, and I can't I can't go back in time and change it, but it was so different. And as managers get hired from time to time, I got to look up who they are because I don't even
Yeah, I
know
know.
who these guys are. And back in the day, back when the steam engine was the way you got west, you knew everybody. You knew who was coming up. You knew who the next manager could be, whether they were in that organization or a different one. Now,
Yep.
once in a while, you look and you go, what did this manager? What's his career path? What did he do? So it's changed. It's taken some of the I guess some of the luster out of the game. Game is still great, still doing very, very well. Will always do great, and I'm glad to see
Yeah.
that. But it's just different. You
Not
don't
as colorful.
have the language. Oh yeah, I mean Lasorda. I worked with Tommy for a while, and you know, and he wasn't even the manager anymore. But we'd be at the winter meetings together, and I sat there wondering what he was going to say when we'd all get together with the. I mean, he was just an advisor, but it could have gone anywhere. You're not really worried about anybody doing that today.
Well, the funny thing was, I mean, for good or bad, and I'm sure a little bit of both, the manager was one of the faces of the organization. Like
No
you
doubt.
knew the manager. You mentioned the Dodgers, Tommy Lasorda. You mentioned the Orioles, it was Earl Weaver. You
Yep.
mentioned the Yankees, it was Billy Martin. Well, then it wasn't, and then it was, and then it wasn't, and then it was again, and then it wasn't, and then it was again. So it was kind of back and forth there for a little bit, but you had an idea, like you just pictured these guys in your head, like you said now. It's almost like a silhouette. Like I don't get an image
Yeah.
of anybody in my head when I say a manager. Like if somebody were to say Tampa Bay, I'd go, all right, Kevin Cash, but
Yeah.
it doesn't resonate with me.
No,
Like I know him, I know most of these guys, but it doesn't resonate like it used to. And I
no.
think, were you in the game as it started transitioning from, the manager, it's going to be the manager's show, to, you know what, we're going to do this in the front office and we're going to just have you there to kind of control the clubhouse, and we'll let you know what the good matchups are and who we want pitching, who we want coming out of the
Yeah.
bullpen, how many pitches we want pitching. Were you there for that transition, and what was that transition like?
Well, I was doing TV when I think when that started, and it wasn't. It may have been going on with a couple clubs when I was still GM, and I would never do that. I would. I
Yeah,
thought my position was, I see the game from a different viewpoint. And the manager's almost on a is every day is vital to the manager. Not that every day is not vital to the GM too, but my I thought my responsibility was to give the manager ideas. Hey, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? This guy's swing's getting a little bit long. Looks like he might be tired. This guy's arm slot's a little bit different. Looks like he may be getting tired. Maybe he's got
yeah,
an injury he's fighting. But I never. I mean, I had great managers in LA. Grady Little and Joe Torre, Hall of Famer, and Don Mattingly, a great one. You know, it wasn't my responsibility to tell them what to do. I thought it was my responsibility to open up their mind to a few different ideas. But I never once put a lineup on anybody's desk. I never once told them what the matchup should be. Many
yeah,
times I says, you know what, do what you. And my relationship was such that I could say this, and they understood that I wasn't trying to lead them into a trap. I'd say, hey, do whatever you think is best. Here's what I'm seeing. But you and you got your coaching staff, all guys that have been around a long time, experts in their area. This is, take a look at this, think about this, but do what you think is best. And we talk about it after the game. I mean, I never went down to the manager's office and like, had a strong debate after a game. I always want to let any of my, not anger, but any of my angst settle overnight. But I was down there every night after a game and say, how you doing? What's going on? Visit with the training staff, stop in to see the coaches here and there. I mean, it was a day-to-day thing so that you could have these types of conversations. But for me, and I think for Sabes too, it was really, hey, here's some things to think about. Here's what we're seeing. You're in it in a different view. Some days the managers are in the weeds, so to speak, and some days
yeah,
the GMs are looking at it from 20,000 feet. Just things to think about. How much of that goes on today? I don't know. I'm pretty
yeah.
sure
That
with Buster and Bob, I'm pretty sure that is probably an old school relationship there.
Yeah, because to me, that's the way it should work. It should be collaborative. But when the game starts, it's you.
Yeah,
That's what we're paying you for.
yeah,
And a lot of it is these guys. It's weird with managers now. They get paid less than they did 10, 15 years ago, a lot of them,
yep,
because they realize their job isn't to run the show. It's the front office's job to run the show. They pick someone that I don't want to say they can control, but if you give somebody $5 million a year, $10 million a year, then hey, you know what? You're going to be stuck with what he wants to do. Pay a guy who's never managed before
yep,
900,000 $1 million and say, hey, it's your first managerial job. You're not going to get one anywhere else. We're going to give you a shot, but this is how things are going to work. Well, then that's how it's going to work.
exactly. And I think that is probably going on and has gone on. I think that's kind of what it is. In some cases, I don't think it's universal, but I think it's certainly more prevalent than 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20. I mean, for sure, 15, 20 years ago, that never happened. I hired somebody to manage. I hired somebody to do it because when you think about matching up, and unless it's the World Series or the LCS or something like that, you don't know. You're not in the clubhouse the entire time, so you don't
Yeah.
know if a guy comes in and he's not feeling right, or he's got something going on, with the family, or somebody's sick, or things like that. You don't always know that. And in the course of the game used to be 3 hours and 20 minutes long. In the course of all those minutes, things can change. And if you've made your plan before the game is unfolded, I don't know how you do that, because I think you end up with situations that are bad matchups or different situations. And I think players know it too. Players know in some cases that what the manager is telling me to do isn't the manager's idea.
Yeah.
And I think some of the best managers in the game today are either old school, Boach, old school,
Yep.
Melvin probably to some extent old school. Dave Roberts done a phenomenal job, bit of old school. But I
Yep.
think that those who can take direction and sell it to the player as if it's their idea, those are probably the guys who are doing best. But think about it. I mean, you were a player. If
Yep.
the coach told you, "Hey, work on this, work on that," it meant more to you than if it was somebody else who was telling the head coach, "Hey, this is what we need you to do." Different dynamic.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So you mentioned faith, family, baseball. I want to focus on the family aspect because being a general manager, as you were with the Dodgers, and assistant GM with the Giants, I mean that's time consuming. That's every day, all day. There's not a huge off season for you guys. How did you balance family and baseball? And I'm pretty sure you've told me stories before where it's either been a party or holidays or whatever. You had to slip away for a little bit and conduct business. How did you can give me one of those stories? I always love those stories, but how did you weave those two together?
Well, you're probably better off asking my family how they weave it together. I was worried about other people's. I worried about my kids certainly, my family, but I was worried about everybody else's, strangers' kids who were players. But yeah, I mean, I went. It is all consuming. It is every day. Sabes and I probably spent more time together than either one of us spent with our families during those 11 years. It's an
Yeah,
everyday thing. Sadly, including Christmas, which I'm not proud of. In fact, one of the stories I'll tell you involved Barry, and it was after he hit, the 73 home runs. He was a free agent, and Scott Boras was representing him. And I'm back in Chicago where I grew up, at a family Christmas Eve function, and Scott calls me, and we're not going to get a deal done on Christmas Eve. I mean, it was probably a month later, but Scott calls me, and everybody's looking at me like, am I going to answer the cell phone? And so I see it's Scott, so I answer it, and I go, hey, I gotta take this, and so they said, God, you take it, go sit in the car, don't do this in front of all of us. You got to go sit
yeah,
in the car. And so I go to get and it's like 10 degrees out, right? I mean, it's nightfall, it's dark in Chicago that time of year, at that time, that time of day. And I said, well, I'm going to go sit in the car. And I go to get the car keys. They said, you don't need the car keys. And I go get my jacket. They says, you don't need a jacket. You go sit in that car that's an ice box. You sit there for as long as you want. You're not turning the heater on. You're not doing anything like that. You can sit out there. You can sit out there for as long as you feel like sitting out there. We're taking our Christmas Eve, and I talked to Scott, and I have much, much respect for Scott. I talked to him on Christmas Eve on Barry, which we ended up signing, on Manny Ramirez, which we ended up signing, and then on Prince Fielder, who we didn't sign, but we were walking down the road until Martinez got hurt in Detroit, and then the owner came in and overwhelmed him with the payday. But it was part of the Christmas tradition, unfortunately. you know, California is 2 hours different than Chicago, so it might have been 4 o'clock, 3 o'clock Christmas Eve there, but in Chicago it was nightfall and 10 degrees. So, oh, yeah.
Did you ask Scott what couldn't wait until the 26th? Why did you have to call me about Barry on Christmas
Well,
Eve? Was that like a strategy he was employing, or was it urgent information he had to pass along?
no, it probably wasn't urgent information because again, none of these deals got done for weeks and weeks and weeks later. Playing Scott for a minute. It'd be probably good to tell one of your iconic clients, hey, I even talked to Ned on Christmas Eve. That's how important this is to me. Meanwhile, I'm shivering in the car, going, Scotty, this is really necessary.
uh, hey, speaking of Barry, what did you make? Because I always say Barry holds a lot of records that are never going to be broken. One of the records that isn't even really a record that'll never be broken is his OPS his last year, and then didn't get a contract the next year. Like
Yeah.
you looked at how he performed and how he played. there is no reason an American League team back at the time wouldn't have signed him because they had the DH. The National League didn't at the time,
Yep.
but they didn't. And my theory was, look, all the steroid allegations had a lot to do with it. The teams that were in position to win a championship didn't want to deal with the circus, and the teams that were not in a position to win a championship didn't want to spend the money and deal with the circus. It was more about the circus coming to town and you having to deal with it. What was your take on like why he didn't get any bites? Because you look at his stats from the last year he played, and you're like, my goodness, this guy was still one of the best hitters in the game.
Yeah. Well, in my time, as far as players I was around on an everyday basis, the best I've seen. Could do it all, and a genius as a hitter. I'm not sure he knew every pitcher's name, but he knew what they were going to do, and he knew release points. And I'd see him set guys up in April, National League West guys. I'd see him set them up in April, look foolish on a pitch, and then hit one in the water in September. When it came time to that, I was already gone, so I wasn't in the mix in San Francisco
Yeah.
in the thought process. But you're probably right. The entire package was probably, is it worth it to add at that point in time? It's things you do think about as a GM. I don't know anybody else's thought process.
Yeah.
There was a lot to him. A bit of a complicated person. My first year with him, I mean, I said hello to him 4 or 5 times, and I'm not the tallest guy going, but I'm not invisible. And he never even nodded. It was like I had said nothing. Hey, B, how you doing? I mean, there was nothing.
So
All
he knew the pitcher's name, but didn't know your name.
it didn't care to. And I said, well, that's okay. I've been around great players in Chicago, Maddux, Dawson, Sandberg, great
Yeah.
flip guys. So it was like, oh, I needed his approval. But then the next year in spring training, I'm walking through the clubhouse, and a guy calls my name. I turn around, it's him, and he says, "Hey, how come you never talk to me? How come you never even?" I said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! It's the other way around." And really, I thought from that day on, he was terrific. I did a lot of things. I got involved with the Sharks years ago. Huge hockey guy when I was growing up and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And I would help former play like guys that are former players now, Vinny Danfus, Mike Ricci, guys like that with their charity stuff. And Vinny Danfus did a lot of work for ALS. And I would go down to the Sharks fundraiser, and I would auction off a photo session with a player at BP and dinner in the club and great seats and this and that, and they'd always come back and say, "Well, we want to meet Barry," of course, and so there I am going, "Hey, B," and he used to say, "You know what? I'll do whatever you need me to do." And I wasn't the PR person, but I still
Yeah.
had that type of persona, I guess. And he'd say, "Look, I'll do whatever you want to do and need to do. Make it turnkey, and don't make it loud. I don't want a lot of people knowing any of this stuff." But he never ever turned me down. He did so
Wow.
much for people on the QT, and I had tremendous respect as a player. But also, the more I got to know him, I see him as a guy that was kind of misunderstood by a lot of different people. I had a great
Yeah.
rapport with him as time went on. I felt he probably doesn't remember my name now, but you know, he knew it was
uh,
good.
I did want to ask you about Jeff Kemp, but you mentioned Greg Maddux. Were you there Maddox's rookie year?
Yes, I was in with Greg for his first 6 years. Then he left for
Okay.
Atlanta, and then I was the only guy to ever trade for him. I traded for him twice in LA.
Oh,
He
that's
threw. I
right.
saw his first pitch. I saw his last pitch, and
Wow.
many more in between. Ironically, you mentioned Barry, and now you mentioned Greg. People are always saying, "Well, who's the best you were ever around?" Barry is the best hitter I was ever around. As I said, genius at what he did. Greg is the best pitcher I was ever around. Genius at what he did. Just cut above all these guys. And Kirsch is going to be a Hall of Famer. Is my
Yep.
first pick my first year. Zach Greinke was a lot like Maddux. I've been around a lot of great ones, but as far as the genius of knowing what to do in the moment and being way ahead of everybody, it was Barry at the plate and it was Greg on the mound. Greg was running our advanced meetings as a 24, 25-year-old. He knew that much. He would sit
Wow.
with veterans on the pitching staff, veterans, guys that had 10 years in the game. He had 3 years in the game. and he would lay out scenarios. I mean, they would come back after pitching and sit next to him because he saw the game like nobody else saw the game. And same thing with
What
Barry.
can you tell what can you tell me about a story? I watched a Greg Maddux documentary that was
Yeah.
really cool. And he told the story of when he was a rookie that he was struggling and he was going to get sent down if he didn't get through 5 innings or didn't
Yep.
win the baseball game or whatever. And it was like 4 2/3 or four. No, he was going into the fifth inning, had a chance to win the game. Cubs were up, but Andre Dawson got hit. So he goes back out there, and instead of staying in the game, he drills somebody
Yes.
because he said, I think he said in the documentary, look, I need the respect of my players or
Yes.
my teammates more than I need to be up here. What do
Yeah.
you remember about that? Because I was like, wow, I'd never heard that story before. And I was like, that's hard for a young kid. Like, all you got to do is pitch one more inning to stay in the
Yeah.
big leagues, as opposed to, I'm going to hit this guy and I'm going to get sent down to the minors. But that's the right thing to do.
Yeah. I don't think he got sent down after that, but it was, that's changing the game too a bit. You don't you see it a little bit, and whenever you see it, it's like a highlight, on the Sports Center or MLB Network when there's somebody that charges the mound or things like that.
Yeah.
But it's part of the competitiveness of the sport. I can remember, and I was just thinking about this the other day. Sadly, Dave Parker passed away, and Dave Parker was, played for the Pirates for a long time, and then went on, and I think he was playing for Cincinnati, if I'm not mistaken. And Greg is a young pitcher. This is his rookie year. And Greg Maddux, when he first came to the big leagues, if he was standing next to the bat boy, you wouldn't know which one was which. Young face, young body, just a smaller frame guy. And I remember him pitching to Parker and knocked him off the plate. And Dave, big guy, big,
Yeah. Big
strong.
guy.
Oh,
Intimidating.
oh yeah. And Greg just took the ball back and walked back on the mound. And then a couple of pitches later, knocked him down again. And Parker starts walking towards the mound. And Greg starts walking towards the plate. And I'm thinking, this isn't right. This isn't mistake. But that was Greg. Greg knew every angle, and he knew it as a young professional. He knew what to do in almost every situation. He didn't like that this Hall of Famer, that this big left-handed hitter was crowding the plate, and he was just a kid, and so he knocked him off the plate not once but twice, in the same at bat. But that's how it was. You earned your reputation in that room by sticking up for your guys. That's why I love hockey so much, because
Yeah.
that's still going on.
Do you think, like, I'm a big proponent and I differ from probably the younger generation in this, and that, look, I do believe in frontier justice in sports. I do believe that players policing players is better than an official or an umpire or the league policing players. I just think if you know how to do it. Now, you can't do it anymore in baseball because these guys don't know where the ball's going. They throw it so damn hard they could kill
Right.
somebody. But back in the day, you hit my guy, I'm going to hit your guy. I'm going to hit him in the ribs, or I'm going to hit him in the ass. I'm going to hit
Yep.
him somewhere where it's not near the head, but my
Yep.
message is going to be sent. You hit one of ours, we're going to hit one of yours. And then the game just moved on. There wasn't a
Yes.
ton of animosity.
No.
Now you throw a curveball that gets away and guys get mad and upset because they don't know what the hell they're doing. But how do you feel about that shift from like players policing the game to like the league taking that completely out and say, no, what, we'll handle the policing. You guys just play.
I kind of liked it in the old way. I liked it where you could knock a guy off the plate, where you could slide hard in the second base on a
Yeah.
double play. I just like that aspect of it because it could change a game. It's not a statistic necessary unless the guy gets hit. It's not anything that you're going to necessarily be able to measure in a box score, but it changes your entire team. It changes your entire dynamic. We had one, I think it was in 2013 against Arizona, where we had a decent team, but we were scuffling. And Greinke was pitching, and they threw high and tight to him, and he hit one of their guys. And then they came back and they threw high and tight to Zach again, up at the head. I think it may have been Ian Kennedy. And our guys had enough. And it was on. I mean, it was old school stuff. It was on. And I went down, I was at a clubhouse after the game, and the unity of the club, which was okay before this day, but the unity of the club, guys who hardly spoke to each other were having dinner together. Guys who, I mean, it bonded the entire group. I think we may have
Yeah.
gone 43-8 or something historic from that moment on. And we all, whenever we reminisce or we get, we run into each other, we'll talk about that game. We talk about that pitch. Zach didn't get hit. He got knocked down, not once, but twice, as I recall. But it changed the dynamic of our club. It brought people together. Now, if nobody does anything, well, now you're doing it the
Yeah.
other way. It's going back the other way where guys are going, well, nobody even sticks up for anybody. But that is a poignant example that I can recall that's not really that long ago that changed our entire structure, changed how we went about our game, and changed our season. I mean, we went from being around 500, maybe 8 or 9 games back, to winning the division by a lot. Because really, in my mind, one thing, us sticking up for Zach Greinke.
I remember you keep taking me down these paths that I'm thinking about now. I want to ask you, and I do want to get to today's baseball and some of the teams today. But what do you remember most? Because this is one of my favorite matchups of the last 20 years: Madison Bumgarner and Puig. Those were like,
Oh
if you
yeah,
were any kind of baseball fan, like, and you knew Madison Bumgarner was pitching against the Dodgers, you were gonna watch that because those were like just like two bulls, like just staring
oh
each
yeah,
other down. It was one of the funnest things to. I don't know like how safe it was for either of those two, but because if they had got into it, there might have been an earthquake in
oh
LA with
yeah.
those two going at him. What do you remember about those matchups?
What I remember most is it didn't matter what the at bat was, they were going to get into it. It could have been an intentional walk, and they would have got into it. Could have been a home run, could have been a strikeout, double play. Who knows? But they were going to get into it. They both competed. I signed Yasiel and brought him to the big leagues. Didn't really want to when I did, but injuries kind of dictated it. A lot of talent that kind of stalled, but just fierce with what he does. And Madison, I mean, I was never around Madison. I was already in LA, but I knew it. We'd see him all the time. And I knew this guy's a bull. This guy will compete to the max. One of the greatest competitors. I was never
Yep.
on the same team around, but that you could see just how he went about it. And I think he had no time for Yasiel Puig. And Yasiel, if you didn't, if you weren't going to kind of quote respect him, he wasn't going to have any time for you either. But what I remember most is that the at bat, the score of the game, nothing else dictated. Just the ferocity on both sides. They were going to get into it, no matter what happened. They didn't like each other.
I got to circle back to Jeff Kent because I wanted to ask you
Yeah,
about him. How is Jeff Kent not, if not in the Hall of Fame, how does he not get at least more consideration? Like he's not even that close to being in the Hall of Fame. When I look at his numbers compared to other second baseman numbers, I'm like, what am I missing here with Jeff Kent?
yeah. I don't. It's one of the great mysteries for me too. He's somebody else that I have so much respect for. I got to San Francisco at the end of the '94 season. In the '95 season, '96 season, we were not very good. We lost 90 some games, maybe both years. We were calling up guys from the instructional league at the end. In fact, I had lunch with one of them who got hurt, Steve Scarsoni, just about a month ago. And we didn't have a good team. And then Sabes took over, and the first major deal he made was Matty Williams that brought Jose Vizcaino, Jeff Kent, Joe Roa, and Julian Tavares. And Jeff Kent was like a 20 home run, 80 RBI guy at the most. And the night before that deal, I called Dallas Green, as I said, my first boss. And I knew how Dallas evaluated players, really tough on guys. And he managed Jeff with the Mets. And so I said, I need some insight from you. What's up? And I tell him about Jeff Kent. He goes, you want a guy that's going to go out with his teammates and, going to be rah-rah and keep guys together. You got the wrong guy. You want a guy that's going to play his ass off day in, day out, compete like crazy, and hate to lose. He's your man. And so, the deal came about. I I don't know. And the team won in '97, won in 2000, 202 World Series, get beat by Anaheim. I think 203 go to playoffs again. Good teams, kind of changed the fortune of the franchise. I don't know, as great as Barry is, and I said the best player I've ever been around on a daily basis, that team doesn't win without Jeff Kent. It doesn't happen. It may be a good team, but it doesn't have the fierceness that he brought to it every day. And he played as hard as any player I've ever seen. Not smooth at second base, but you know what? Hang in there on a double play, you never doubted it. Every at bat, this guy had over 100 RBIs, maybe 8 out of 9 years. And people say, well, he was in a lineup with Barry. Yeah, sure. You don't think Barry was driving in over 100 runs? Who was left? I mean, one guy was ahead of the other in the order all the time. They competed. They didn't really get along, obviously. There's video that'll explain that.
Yes.
But they respected each other, I think. But Jeff Kent, I think, is so, I don't know if it's misunderstood or overlooked because he was on the West Coast when he was doing all this stuff, and a lot of people in the Central Time Zone or Eastern Time Zone that have the vote, aren't watching it. But this guy, to me, was instrumental in a decade worth of Giants baseball that changed the dynamic of the franchise, and just competed like there was no tomorrow. A cliche term, but really did. I'll take you back to one other thing. I can't remember what year it was, but it may have been 2000. I think he won the MVP in 2000. It's mid June. We're about 500. We got a day night doubleheader at home against Colorado. He comes in sick. He's really under it. And Stan Conti, our great trainer, gets him some fluids and this and that. And Dust, I think Bake says, you're not playing today. And he goes, oh, no, 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 I'm playing today. And he plays in game one. Now we got like 4 hours between games. It's not the best if you're really sick, waiting around to play another game. And I think he played both ends of a doubleheader. And we were like, oh my goodness. And the entire team, he was not a rah-rah guy at all.
Yeah.
But they knew they could count on the performance. They knew that he was, in Dallas Green's terms, a gamer, a guy that was going to go out there all the time. And that day, from that day on, I think if you look up in history, from that moment on, that team took off. Again, it's one of those things that you don't see in a box score. You may not even know the story on
Yeah.
top. But this is how things change, and how one player episode, high and tight pitch, a little bit of a skirmish on the field, guy playing through injury, guy playing sick, 2 games, it changed everything. But he was a phenomenal Giant, one of the all-time best. And I think that when you look at the body of work for that amount of time, um, I've been disappointed in it every year that he's been on the ballot. Nobody saw this. This guy,
Yeah.
he wasn't Robbie Alomar at second base. He wasn't slick or smooth, but he competed and he played. And they only, as many analytics as you can put on a piece of paper. There's only one way a team wins a game statistically. That's to score more runs than the other team. That hasn't changed. And when you look at how many runs this guy drove in clutch situations and how he went about it, for a long time, the only guy that may have been better was Barry. And the day he won the MVP, Jeff, I remember Sabes and I were together. I told Sabes, I said, "This is the best thing that could happen to us." If Barry would have won it, nobody would have. He was winning them every year. But the competitor inside the clubhouse to Barry, the guys that respected each other but weren't going to go have a cup of coffee together. Those two guys, now suddenly Barry was like, "Huh, this guy won? Huh, I gotta get even better." And then
Yeah.
we took off. And next year Barry hit the 73.
Yeah, I think Barry would disagree with you. That was the best thing to happen to the club. I think he probably
I
he
don't have
probably
any doubt.
wouldn't he, he probably wouldn't agree. Well, Jeff Kent definitely in the Red Ass Hall of Fame.
Oh yeah,
He's one of my favorite players to watch just because of what you said. It was funny. We used to interview him weekly, Ned, on the show, and I asked him about baseball, just in general, other
yeah,
teams, and he goes, "I don't watch baseball."
yeah.
I go, "What do you mean you don't watch baseball?" And that was the first time I realized a lot of people that play sports don't actually watch them. They're not huge sports fans. I just kind of figured,
Yep.
well, if you play sports, you watch sports, you love sports. Yeah, it's like, nah, I don't even know like who's on other team. I just go out there and play, and it's something I love to do and I'm good at. And
Yep.
but I don't watch it. I don't go home and watch it. I was like, wow, that was kind of a shocker to me.
Yeah. Well, he's an honest character. He can tell you what he's thinking, whether you like it or not. But so much respect for him. I'll say it again. That team, that segment of team, great things. New ballpark became a part of it. Ballpark
Yep.
was online in 2000. The 97 team doesn't win, doesn't go from not losing 95 to getting to the playoffs and being competitive the next year, playing a playoff game, 163rd game with the Cubs. That stuff doesn't happen. That ballpark may or may not even be there. So
Yeah.
that team, I think, had a lot to do with that. And he was right in the middle of all of it and a key guy. That franchise, I don't think, is as good as it was from 97 to '04, '03 or '04, whenever he left. I don't think the success is as great as it was without him sitting in the middle of it.
Yeah. All right, let's get to Dodgers Giants. They're going to be
Yeah.
going at it this weekend before the All-Star break. You're on both sides of this thing. What was your perspective of it as in the Giants organization? What was your perspective of it in the Dodgers organization, and what it meant to both franchises,
Yeah.
both teams, and how it may have differed?
I'm just glad I grew up in Chicago, so I didn't grow up being a fan of either one because one would have been absolutely irritated with me all the time. Um, in San Francisco, I can remember one of my first Dodger Giants series, and George Costa, who did stadium ops for a long, long time. We were at Candlestick, and we'd have 8,000 people, 9,000 people. Dodgers come into town, we'd have 55,000 people,
Yeah.
55,000 people. They'd leave town, we'd have 8,000 people. So I see George one day, and I said, "Explain this to me. I've been here a few months, but explain this dynamic to me." And he goes, "Well, we need a different ballpark. People love the Giants, but they're really not into baseball that much. Some of them don't even like baseball." I says, "Then why do 55,000 people show up when the Dodgers are here?" He goes, "They may not like baseball, but they hate the Dodgers." So, so it was remarkable. But we always felt, well, I shouldn't say we always felt, as I observed it, and I can tell you when we would fly to LA, you feel the wheels come down out of the jet as it's approaching LAX. There would be life inside the plane. There would be like guys would start getting amped up a little bit about this series, about this rivalry. And I think that from a Giants I'd say only from my perspective. I don't want to bring anybody else into it without them on the line here. But I think that, you think about LA and San Francisco, LA, glitz, Hollywood, this and that. You think of San Francisco, beautiful, wine country, kind of laid back. Not that LA is not laid back, but like the Giants were always behind the Dodgers.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Saves did in the winter of 96, 97 were get guys like Jeff, guys who came in with a chip on their shoulder. JT Snow, great Giant, brought him in. All these guys that started to show up, they were like, the olden days, like Robbie Thompson, Matty Williams, Kurt Manwaring, those kind of guys that were just grinders, grind out everything. And the Giants, I think, had more to prove at that point in time. They needed to get the respect of LA and the Dodgers, who had Tommy manage them for a long, long time, and very successful franchise. And I think that the Giants kind of felt maybe like Philly feels to New York, like the little brother,
Yeah, little brother.
a little bit. And I think that's how the team looked at it. And I think the fans certainly get into it. In San Francisco, the only place I've ever been where anybody chances beat anybody is in San Francisco, beat LA. You don't hear that any other place. But that's part of the rivalry, even though it began on the East Coast and came west in '58. And from the other standpoint, I still have so much respect for the Giants. I love my time there. It was a special time in my career. Love the city, love the people, the whole deal. Still stay in touch with a lot of the people that are still there. And I've been gone, believe it or not, 20 years. I left 20
I
years
know
ago.
it's incredible.
This November, it'll be 20 years. But I
Wow.
still have so much respect for the group, and they bring me back for different events and stuff when Mike Murphy goes in the Hall of Fame and all, things like that. But from LA's standpoint, I don't know how they looked upon the Giants before I got there. But I know that in my conversations with our group, and when I left, the Giants were going through a little bit of a turnover and a little bit of a downtime in '06, '07, '08, perhaps. I said, you can't disrespect these guys. You can't take them light because I know what this means to them. And so, we percolated and we did good. We did good or they did good back and forth for a decade or so, and for longer than that, a couple of years ago even. So I think it's two different dynamics. I don't know if the LA fans are as agitated as the Giant fans are. Don't know, but I know that the Giant fans, beating LA is a huge deal, and coming out ahead of them is a huge deal. And I think maybe that's maybe. And I never asked Frank McCourt this question: why I ended up being a GM and how I got, what made him select me. Jeff Kent may have had a little bit to do with it because he was a Dodger at the time. But I think we beat the Dodgers 7 out of 8 years, 8 out of 9 years, finished ahead of them in the NL West. It was something like somebody told me that one time. Well, this may be why you ended up because they got tired of getting beat. But it's two great franchises, two iconic franchises, and two of the greatest ballparks in the country sit in L.A. and San Francisco. Couldn't always say that. You had Dodger
No.
Stadium, and then you had the stick. Unique, to say the least.
All right, let's talk about the Giants and where they're at
Yeah,
right now. I think it's 5.5 games back
yeah,
of the Dodgers. They make the big trade for Rafi Devers for Tibbs and Harrison. And where are you at with them right now? Because clearly Webb and Ray are as good as it gets at 1-2. I
yes,
mean, those guys have been fantastic this year. Birdsong's been okay. Verlander looked to have a little jump on his fastball last start, but before that,
yeah.
he has been, I mean, kind of what you might expect from a 40-plus-year-old pitcher with all the mileage on his arm. But the offense has still kind of been an issue for him a little bit. Devers has taken a little while to get going. When you see the Giants and where they're sitting right now moving forward, what's your take on them?
I think it's a different team than it's been the last few years. I think what Buster brings, while he doesn't bring a ton of experience as an executive, he brings a ton of experience as a winner and a champion. I see a different approach. I see more intensity. I see just more drive and passion for what they do. Are they going to have the staying power? I don't know. I think, and the Dodgers are. I think they've lost six in a row coming into the
Yep.
series. I think the time to get the Dodgers were when they had basically an entire pitching staff on the IL, and like they had 15 at one time, and they had a very tough 30-day schedule where they were playing good teams. Dodgers started that in first. Dodgers finished that 30-day run in first. That was
Yeah.
the time for the San Diegos or the Giants, I think, to make a move and maybe get 2 or 3 games up. That didn't happen. I don't know if the Giants have the staying power this year, but I think the Devers deal is going to go down as one of the landmark deals for the franchise. I think they needed that deal in a lot of different ways. Tough getting free agents to come there for whatever reason. Supposedly the court of Aaron Judge. We know how the Korea thing turned out.
Yeah.
Shohei, all these different Sasaki, finishing second or third in every free agent race, unless you want to overpay somebody, which is never a good tactic. But I think that this deal could be looked upon as big as any deal that they've made in the last 30 years to change the tenor of the franchise. We would always make deals at the end of July, whether I was in San Francisco or in LA. This one obviously happened earlier. But I think when your team plays hard, and there's no doubt this team plays really hard, they give it what they've got to give. When somebody walks in that room that people know and they know it's a really good player, that brings even more life to it. And I think that's part of the benefit of doing the deal that Buster and Zach did a while, a month ago or whatever it was, 3 weeks ago. I think that's huge. I think it'll pay dividends, no doubt. I think we'll also at some point help them draw more free agents to San Francisco if that's how they want to go. Um, so I think it's got a lot of good things. Do they have the staying power? I don't know that they have that.
What will the acquisition of Devers mean for Adames and Chapman and Ramos around them? Because that's the one thing they haven't had in such a long time, like a presence
Yes,
in the middle of the order that you had to game plan for. And I always say it's not just that guy, it's the guy behind him and the guy in front of him and maybe the guy two spots
no doubt.
behind him. Like, well, what's he going to mean for those guys?
Well, you hit it right there. I mean, it changes your entire lineup when you put a middle of the order bat that can produce runs. It changes everybody in front of it and behind it. It just has that type of effect. I think he has the ability to make players better. I think he has the ability to have players get different pitches that they would rather see than maybe what they do see from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's got an impact on more than just one spot in the lineup. And that's why I think it's going to go down as one of the great trades in the franchise. I think it was bold. Surprisingly, I don't think anybody knew this was coming down until it came down. It was like, whoa, the Giants, what? I mean, everybody was like taken aback by it, which is a lot of credit to both franchises that they kept the thing locked down. But I think it's going to have long time ramifications in a positive way for the franchise. I think they needed to do it. Boston needed to move on and solve their issue, kind of like Manny years ago when I got Manny
Yeah.
out of there. But I think it's going to pay dividends for the Giants for a long time to come in a lot of different ways.
And since you've been through this before, bringing in star players to an organization, especially when it's a trade like this, how long before you expect they're going to be comfortable? Because I think people say, "Oh, it's Devers. He's going to hit the ground running. He's going to hit home runs. He's going to do everything he did in Boston." I'm like, "Well, look, he's moved. He's got to get comfortable. I'm sure he wants to put the pressure on yourself to play really well to justify the trade. You got to look for a new house. You might even have family considerations. It just, there's a lot of stuff going on. So I always say, like, give these guys a little bit of time to get acclimated. Don't judge them on their first two,
No.
3, 4, 5 months. Judge them after that. What did you notice about guys that came over that were big splash guys that, maybe went through all the things that I mentioned?
Well, I don't think it's fair to have the immediate expectation that the resume is going to be there as soon as they show up. That doesn't always happen. It happened with Manny. I mean, Manny was maybe one of the greatest September players. I think he had 19 home runs and drove in almost 50 and almost at
Yep. I
400.
remember that.
But that's not common, and it's more common for a guy to struggle. We talked about Barry, we talked about Greg earlier in the show, and there's a long list of guys I know that are in Cooperstown, and I think they all go through periods of time where they press, where they struggle a little bit. Sports is not easy, especially at the
Yeah.
highest level. It's just not going to happen. And I think there is a little bit of pressure on guys to do it. Not that they can't perform under pressure. I think you'll see that this player really can and really will. But it takes a little bit of time. You're right, a huge adjustment. I mean, you're not even coming from like, San Diego to San Francisco, West Coast to West
Yeah.
Coast. I mean, you're going from one side of you wake up and you're looking at the Atlantic. You go to bed, you're looking at the Pacific. I mean, it's like you can't get any further apart than those two destinations, and it takes time. It takes time to feel comfortable where you stop thinking about I'm new, or
Yeah.
the public starts thinking about, well, when's it going to happen? When's it going to happen? As things kind of settle in and it kind of settles down, things will start to take off. He probably needs, if he has a big series coming up, who knows?
Yeah.
That may ignite the entire thing because he's capable of doing all sorts of positive things for this franchise.
Well, let's be honest. No one ever accused Manny of getting inside his own head. So Manny was free. He was unencumbered when it came to that.
No,
He-
Man, I
Give me a
tell you
bat and
what,
I'll hit.
Manny was really smart. Barry was the best I've ever seen. Manny was probably the second best hitter I've ever seen as far as thinking about what he was doing. He sometimes played it in a different way, but he was far from a fool. Far from. He was really, really sharp at what he did. And a guy like Barry, I mean, they worked at their
Yeah.
craft all the
Okay,
time.
I'll ask you a ridiculously impossible question, but it just popped into my head, and I'd be curious to get your take on it. Better right-handed hitter, Manny Ramirez, Miguel Cabrera, Albert Pujols.
Oh, thanks. Another guy that you didn't mention that's to me right around there is Nomar.
Oh,
People
that's
forget
right.
about Nomar, but boy, oh boy, whew, spent a lot of time around him, both when he played and also as in doing TV. Like another guy that just sees it differently. That's a really tough question. Um, I was never around Albert day to day. I was never around Miguel day to day. Um, so I don't know how they.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what the numbers say, and you know what their career is and the Hall of Famous resumes that they have. I'm not answering that question.
Yeah, okay, very good. We'll put them all at tie for first. Hey, and it won't be too much longer before I can throw Aaron Judge in there as
Yes.
well, the way he's going about it. So give me your take on the Dodgers, whose pitching staff again decimated,
Yep.
again figuring out a way to win games. I mean, the bullpen's even been hurt. They go get Tanner Scott. He's been okay. It just you look at this team, you're like, how do they keep doing it? Because Mookie Betts has really struggled this year, which makes me wonder if there's something else going on. Maybe not, but this isn't usually. You don't usually see Mookie Betts struggle
Right.
for this long a period. Freeman's gone into like kind of the deep freeze over the last month. Otani's Otani, and Will Smith has had an incredible year. But what do you make of them going forward? Because I'm with you. They went through a month where they were in first or still in first, tough schedule, and they didn't even particularly play that well. They got guys struggling, and they still managed to get through it. Like when those guys, when Mookie gets back to clicking and Freeman, gets back to swinging the bat the way he did in the first half of the season, Pajas has been fantastic for him. But Snell will be coming back at some point. Glass now just came back yesterday. Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me if they won this by 10 games or more.
Wouldn't surprise me either. Ultra talented. Yeah, banged up, no doubt. A lot of injuries, especially to the pitching staff. And then you kind of highlighted the hitters that have struggled a little bit. And Pajes has been really, really
Yeah.
terrific after struggling last year. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Ramos, who waited a while to get going, but now has turned into a very, very good player. But they also know how to win. They go into games and they know they're going to win the game. They could be down by 4 runs in the fifth inning. Doesn't bother them. They know that they're going to get into the soft side of the bullpen for an inning or two. They know that their closer is going to look around and see the moments a little bit too big, and they just do it. I've been saying it for years, and the guys on the network always kidded me about it. But the games are too long for the other side. They're just too long. If you played 4 inning games against the Dodgers, yeah, they might be 5 games over 500. But playing 9 inning against them, it's tough to beat them, and they know what they're doing. They haven't missed the playoffs. I mean, I've been out of the GM chair for a decade, I guess, maybe a touch more. And I had the first two division champions, and they haven't missed a beat since. So they know what they're doing, and they have ultra talent. Ownership is so possessed with winning. We all see it in a lot of different ownerships. But Mark Walter, who is the key guy, and Stan Kasten and Todd Bowley and Magic, their appetite to win is like nothing I've ever seen. Every ownership group will tell you, "Oh yeah, we want to win, we want to do this," and they are relentless in their pursuit. There's probably been times when they probably thought that they were done with the off-season shopping, where Mark or Todd or Stan said, "Hey, you know what? This guy's out there. It's going to cost us some money, but this guy makes us better. We won 105 games. This guy even makes us better. Boom, get him." I mean, that's almost unheard of, but that's how they go about it. It's nobody's really. I don't think he's brought this up. Peter Guber's one of their owners as well. Great
Yep,
guy. I'm sure you know Peter. I mean,
I do.
guy. I mean, So now you got Mark that's bought the Lakers. And one of the guys that they're tight with the Dodgers is one of the Warriors owners. So how are those games going to be? How are they going to be? It's pretty
Yeah, I
interesting.
love it that Goober's Dodgers Warriors and then
Yeah.
Walters is Dodgers Lakers. It's
Yes.
just like this weird kind of
Oh yeah.
bizarre love triangle they got
Yep.
going on there. And it's disappointing for people that don't like the Lakers to find out that he's so ultra competitive because I'm
Oh,
sure the Lakers are probably going to be back to being the Lakers in short order. Once they
I don't
clear
have any.
LeBron
I don't have
off
any
the
doubt.
books, they got Luca, and they're just gonna, yeah. I mean, it wouldn't surprise
There's
me to see
no
the
doubt.
Lakers up and running.
Yeah, I don't have any doubt. And it's just how they do it.
Yeah.
It's
What
just how,
about Otani, who we've seen pitch? I think one inning, and then two and two.
yeah,
I think he's
yeah,
had four starts, but
yeah,
I mean they're really slow playing it. And I get it. I
yeah.
understand why, but do you think? I mean, are they even going to try to stretch him out? I think Dave Roberts said, "I'm not even sure if he'll get to 5 innings this year, maybe." But it's like I get that they're playing the real long game here with him, and I get it. It's Otani. How do you see that one going? Because it is because they do need pitching. It's not like they have a bunch of pitching. They're like, we'll just pitch him for two. We're no, like I said, Glass now just came back. Snell's been out. They've had other guys missing. It's just like last year, and they still win. But what do you make of Otani and just kind of like there's slow playing it, and then there's really slow playing it, which is what they're doing.
Well, I think if you, as I look at the franchise for really a decade now, from a close vantage point, but not from directly inside, everything they do is got the long play to it. They will take more time with a young player and give them more opportunities than most teams. They think about the future more than they think about today. Not that today is not important because they do value today, but almost everything they do in a long, long play. I'll give you an example. Former ex Muncie,
Yeah.
okay, sitting at the house in Texas, gets a call, comes to the organization. I think he sits in the minor leagues the entire year. Comes up to play third base because there's an injury. I can't remember the exact detail to it, but my recollection of Max Muncy seeing him play maybe 10 games in the big leagues for the Dodgers was great arm from third base, could pick it and could get it over there, but really struggled offensively. Did they send him back down? Did they outride him? Did they get him? No, no. They played the long game. I don't know how many home runs he's got as a Dodger, but he's got well over 100,
Yeah.
and he was a cast off by the A's. So, that's one example, but there's numerous examples. They play the long game. They will give a player an extra, it seems, an extra 30, 40 at bats, an extra 8 to 10 to 12 innings when almost everybody else would say, okay, enough, who's coming up? No, they play it long, and they're doing the same thing with Choi. They are in as much as and you're right when you say, okay, Mookie hasn't been as good as he's been in the past. Still a great player, genius at what he does. Freddie, great start, a little bit of a downturn here and there. Will Smith, great year. Pitching staff, 15 guys on the IEL, right? They're up by 5 games
I
and
know.
they just lost 6 straight, and they're up by 5 games. How do you go through that? If you took the name and the standings away and you said, okay, let me give you a scenario. One of the best players in the game is hitting 249. Okay, not really the same guy that he's been the last 10 years. Another guy's an older guy, and he's dropped 30 points, 40 points off his batting average the last month. Okay, and the pitching staff, they've got an entire staff on the IL. What place are they in? You're probably going, well, probably third or fourth, but they're not.
Yeah.
They know what they're doing. They've got the depth to it. They play the long game. They're in no hurry, I don't think, to have Otani throw 5 innings,
Yeah.
6 innings, 7 innings. I thought last year that they would probably use him out of the bullpen in key situations because it's not a roster spot. He's already on the roster. You can move him off the DH, let him pitch the ninth, let him pitch the eighth because the guy's, nothing phases him. But they waited on that too. They have a massive investment in this guy, so they can't afford another Tommy John surgery.
Yeah.
because of the arm when he's one of the greatest players in the game the last few years. And somebody that um, I've seen a lot of players come and go. I've seen very few players. I can't really think of another one that came into a season with a new team with higher expectations than he did a year ago and exceed the expectations. That's like, you're hoping to get 100 cents on a dollar, so to speak. You're hoping that somebody will meet what your expectation
Yeah.
is. This guy 50-50 and
Yeah.
doing what he does and how he plays. And like, whoa, I mean, nobody's done that. And here he came in with the largest contract in history, structured in a unique way, all those things, and met every expectation. Not easy to do.
Yeah. I want to say that like when people ask me about him, I go, you know what? I want to say he's the most. I don't know if he's the greatest player ever because he's got a lot more years to stack up. He may be the most talented player ever to play in the game. But the only reason I hesitate to say that because he doesn't play the field. And I always say it's how do you compare him, who's a great pitcher,
Yeah.
who pitches maybe 30 times a year, to Willie Mays, who's in center field and maybe the greatest center fielder of all
Yeah.
time, who gives you defense and
Yeah.
and offense. So it's hard for me to say that. He's definitely the most unique player we've ever seen to be able to
Yes.
do this. People don't even talk about his speed. This guy is fast. Like he is an incredible athlete, and I have no doubt that if he spent time on it, he could be a center fielder or a right fielder if he
Oh yeah.
wanted to be. But you watch him, Ned. I still shake my head. I watched him. I'm an Angel fan, unfortunately, but I watched him for years with the Angels, and I'm thinking, what am I watching? And I've seen it for 3 years, and now 2 years with the Dodgers. You even got to be like, he's absurd.
There's there's nobody I've seen like him. Maybe Barry back in the day in a lot of ways, but just unique. And people always say, well, Babe Ruth, him and Babe Ruth. Um, he's different than Babe Ruth. I'm not old enough to know I've seen Babe Ruth, but I've studied Babe Ruth, so to speak. Babe Ruth threw about 40 innings, I think, after he became an outfielder. As a pitcher, won 100 games about, and
Yep.
was a great pitcher, and then became the hitter and really
Yep.
changed the whole game and made it popular. But he didn't do both. And Shohei hasn't done both for a couple of years, but we know he did both at a high level. And we'll probably do it again at a high level. But I don't think they're in any hurry to stretch him out or to see, how long
Yeah.
it can go or how it's going to look. I think they're going to continue to play the long game. And, they're very wise. They're very smart. They're very wise. And as I said, the ownership, there'll be there'll be nothing that stands in their way. I went from like a different type of ownership, and I GM for Mark and Stan for 3 seasons for 12, 13, or 14. So I went on May 1st. They took control of the club in 212, and things changed dramatically overnight. I mean, as stark a difference as possible from begging for, could we do this? Could we do that? To wait, well, we can't do all of this. We can only do half of this because we have to have a team. You just can't keep
Yeah.
collecting because their appetite for success was like, I can't tell you how many times I talked to them and they said, "You like this guy? Well, sure, I like this guy. Well, why don't we go get him?" Well,
Why you had to tell them no?
oh yeah, we got to slow this down a little bit. It's like, oh, but yeah, but
Oh.
they're insatiable. There's no doubt in a great way.
Yeah, before we run, I got to get to some Sharks, but I got to. Have you seen Jacob Mizorowski pitch, the kid for the Brewers?
I did not, but I know he had a great game the other night. Gave up, I think, the leadoff homer to Shohei, and then was
Otani?
tremendous.
Yep.
Yes,
Yeah, he struck out 12 of his first 14,
yeah,
and I think he pitched 6 innings, gave up that one run, and he's like Skeens to me. I wouldn't put him in
yeah.
that category, like because he's got to pitch more games. But as a watch, like as a this guy's pitching, I'm going to turn on the TV set and watch him. Like he was easy 99 101, just cruising, and then 97 slider, 90 curveball. I think Shohei got him on a curveball. I don't think he threw him another one the next time.
No,
But I mean, you're talking about a Dodger lineup that's pretty decent and struck out 12 of the first 14. Like,
Yes.
that's the kind of stuff I love to see. The only thing I miss is, again, I'll be the guy on the porch again saying this is what I liked when I was growing up. But I always mention Dave Stewart, Roger Clemens. When those
Yeah.
guys were pitchers, like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to watch
Oh
that
yeah.
game. And I'm probably going to get to see him for 8 innings. They might even pitch a complete game against one another. Now you get a great pitching matchup. You're like, it'll probably last
Yeah.
6 innings, and that's it. So, I mean, that's different. Which, just on that tangent, makes me appreciate Logan Webb even more, because Logan Webb's one of the best pitchers in the game, and when he
Yep.
gets the ball, you almost expect he's going to go 7 innings, don't you?
Yes. Oh yeah. And that's one of the things that has changed dramatically. I mean, think about Jack Morris in the World Series in Game
Yeah,
7.
yeah, 10th inning,
Yeah, and Tom Kelly comes out and he says, "What are you doing out here?
yeah,
Get back in the dugout." Well, I think it's no, 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 no. You just get back in the dugout. I mean, I don't know anybody's doing that now. I mean, Madison would do that.
yes,
Shaw would do that in his day. They ain't coming out now. Six is almost a complete game.
no doubt about it. So let me know about the Sharks a little bit, because I
Yeah,
watched them a little bit this year, and obviously, one of the worst records again, but I thought watching them was like more fun. You watched them. Celebrini had a fantastic year.
yes,
Eklund had a really nice year. Smith had his moments this year, and that's kind of part of the young core. And I'm not sure, was the kid Misha is the kid they drafted this
yep,
year, second overall, another top six forward. So give me your thoughts on where they're at and where they're going. It may still be another year. I mean, I'm not sure,
yep,
but I watched them this year. I was like, okay, I can kind of see it forming where these young guys are going to play together. They got an idea, and I think Celebrini, he's so, you talk about competitive and just understands the game at a higher level than
yep.
young guys maybe do. Where you give us a little insight on the Sharks and maybe where they're headed.
Yeah, I'll start with Mike Greer, our leader and our GM. Ultra competitive, and to have as many losses as we've had. He does, his personality never changes. His vision continues to be straight on, and he's tolerating defeat as best he can. But he is starting to build what I think is going to be one of the best organizations in the league. I don't say that because I worked there. I say that because I've seen teams for decades, and I've seen how they come together. You talk about Macklin, young kid, really, but to me, almost genius at what he does, even at this age, at this early age, and this juncture of where he's at, sees the game differently, ultra quick, and not just quick with his feet or quick with his hands, but quick with his mind. Just phenomenal. And Will Smith, as you mentioned, really came on the second half. Misa's going to be another really, really good player. Eklund's coming on. It's been built. The amateur guys, Chris Morehouse runs that. He's done a great job. We're fitting pieces together. Askarov is a goaltender that Mike acquired last year.
From
A goaltender is
Nashville?
like you're starting. Yeah, it's like you're starting
Yeah.
pitching. Without the goaltender, you're always going to be chasing the scoreboard. So a legit number one. Maybe not today, but certainly in the near future.
Yeah.
Uh, I think the best days are coming and they're not that far away. It might take another year, but I think this year we're going to be decidedly better. Mike's gone out and gotten some veteran defensemen to help our younger defensemen. Your defensemen always take longer to develop than your forwards or even your goaltending. Goaltending takes a little while, but your defensemen really take is probably more time than any other specific position. But we're starting to get to the point where we're going to have competition too. And I don't think you can ever discount the value of competition, no matter what the sport is. Your basketball time. Guys wanted to play.
Yeah.
Guys wanted minutes. They wanted shots. They wanted the ball. Hockey, they want time on ice. They want power play time. They want that time. Baseball, want at bats, want innings. So, for a few years there, we didn't necessarily have a ton of competition. But now we're starting to going to have some competition. There's going to be guys that were just drafted a year ago, just drafted last month, that are going to start to put pressure on other young guys that have been here 3 years, 4 years. So it's coming together. I go back to, and I was in San Francisco. I started there 30 years ago. So I spent 11 years there, really kind of during one of the Sharks were great for 20 years. And I remember the tank, how
Hmm.
alive it was and how like electric it was. And I think it's going to be back to that in the near future. The job that Mike's done is terrific. And I think that he's not only gotten talented players, but he's got guys that want to win. To look at after a game at Macklin or Will or William Eklund or and on, and how they hate defeat. You can love to win. That's easy.
Yeah.
But you gotta hate to get beat. And I see that in them. And I think that that's going to continue on because that's the next group. That's the next Joe Thornton's, Patrick Marlowe's,
Yeah.
that group. That's them. And those guys hated to get beat too. And you got to have that. Besides your talent, you've got to have that type of perspective on it. And the kids got it. And there's more coming.
I
Misa
think in
from
a couple of years, everyone that follows hockey, even a little bit, is going to know Macklin Celebrini. Like I
yes,
just really think he's one of those. He's one of those guys that can lift up an organization with his work ethic and just it's his competitive nature. And again, it just seems like he's an older soul
yep,
than what his age says he is. So I'm excited to watch him next year. And I think you're right. And I think they're building it. You guys are building it the right way. Like when this thing gets going, it's going to be sustainable, and we're going to be able to
yes,
keep this thing
yeah,
chugging for a number of years because I don't think people in San Jose realized how good they had it for 2 decades. I
oh
mean,
yeah,
there's everything other than a Stanley Cup. They lost to Pittsburgh in 15, but other than that, I mean, they got the President's Trophy, and they were one of the best teams, and you had Hall of Famers on that roster. Like it doesn't get better than that. Being
no,
that good for
no.
20 years. I don't know if they'll have that kind of run, but I think a run's coming at some point.
Yeah, I got to say one more thing about Macklin too, because you're right. I mean, he sees the
Yep.
game differently. He's
Yep.
he's so young, but also his family ultra successful, ultra smart. Rick Celebrini with the Warriors for a while,
Yep.
is in the heartbeat of it. So young Macklin, no doubt, was around those guys. Was around Kerr as a watching a
Yep.
coach and Steph and on and on. And I think when you're a young athlete and you are exposed to greatness and how they prepare and how they think and how those people see the game from the bench or from the court, I think that you can't help if you really love the game and you pay attention to detail. You can't help but pick up a lot of that. And I
Yeah.
think that's one of the great organizations in sport the last 10, 12 years. And so, he as a young as a teenager, he got to see all as probably before he was a teenager, got to see that stuff up close. And his dad is also a great, great guy, Rick. I've had him in some of the
Yeah, he
classes
is.
and just sees sports in a unique way. And we've all been around a lot of guys in all sports, right? And there's 5% that you don't think see the game at all. There's like 90% that see the game kind of the same way, little variances. Then
Hmm.
there's the top 5% that you go, whoa, whoa, this is different. And that's the thing to celebrate.
Now the Warriors are a great organization. Overrated head coach, but other than that, great organization.
Uh,
I got to give Steve a dig every now and again. It's my birthright to do so. I think having gone to Arizona with him. All right, before we let you go,
yeah.
Dodgers Giants. One story. I think the fans who didn't hear this, when we were doing the show years and years and years ago. Give me the funny story about you and Sabes down
Oh
in
yes.
LA watching the game, and Tommy Lasorda's in the suite as well.
Okay. Well, Billy DeLury was their traveling secretary for decades. Great guy. And he would always find Brian and I a place to sit. And it happens to be a Saturday game, I think a game of the week, a lot of media because a former Dodger, Oral Hershiser, is pitching at Dodger Stadium wearing black and orange. So it's a big day. And this was Tommy's guy. And so Billy comes in and says, I really only have one place for you guys to sit. And we said, where's that? He says, well, in Tommy's suite with Tommy. And Saves looks at me and he goes, I'm not doing it. No way am I doing it. Game of the week or whatever it was, we're going to be on, they're going to show the suite and we're going to be, us two guys are going to be sitting with Lasorda. Let's go back to the hotel. And I go, oh, I don't want to watch the game on a television. I want to see it live. I mean, this is the rivalry. This is the guy we just signed, to compete against his whole team type of thing. And Sabes going, I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. I said, Sabes, let's just go do it. Let's do it. And he goes, all right. So he's sitting to the far left. I'm in the middle, and Tommy's at the far right. And there's hardly any conversation. And I know Sabes like a brother, and he is hot. He just wants no part of this. So I had dinner years ago across at Tommy Toys, a place across the street from the Transamerica building. I have a dear friend named Tom Dreesen, who was the opening act with Frank Sinatra. It
I
was the
know,
last
Tom.
years of his career. And so Tom, huge Cub fan, said I help him get Cub tickets all the time. I'm still working for the Cubs. He calls me and he says, "Hey, we got a show with Sinatra at the Circle Star Theater down in Redwood City." Okay, I had no idea where Redwood City was. You know, I ended up living next door to it when I lived there. But he says, I got 2 tickets. Barbara Sinatra's not coming tonight, so you and bring somebody with you. Meet me at the hotel. We'll go out in the limo and we'll do this. So, long story short, I guess it's already a long story, but a little bit shorter. We go out to the show. I take our pitching coach Billy Connors, and we're coming back, and I wanted to meet Frank. I mean, as an Italian kid meeting Sinatra,
Yeah.
that's pretty strong. And the opportunity to present itself. So Dreesen says in the car ride back, Frank's in a different car than we are, and he says when we get to the restaurant, if he's in a good mood and he wants to, welcome people, you know, I'll find out and I'll bring you guys back. You say hello, and then you got to go. So he's in a good mood. We go back. We say hello, thank him for the music. What an honor it is. We're walking out of the back room, and he says, "You guys are leaving?" I said, "Well, we don't want to stay for dinner. We just wanted to say hello." And he goes, "So you're going to insult me and leave?" I said, "No, Mr. Sinatra. We didn't insult you." So we sit down and we have dinner. It's going for like 3 hours. So,
Wow.
about the Rat Pack and Hollywood and all this great stuff. And now he wants to talk some baseball. And he says, I said, "Well, you're a big Dodger fan, right?" He goes, "Well, I'm tight with Tommy. Tommy and I are great friends." He says, and I've never really told Tommy this, but I grew up in Hoboken, New Jersey. From where I lived, I could see the lights of the Polo Grounds, and I was a Giants fan, and I'm still follow the Giants. And he says, if you look at the hat, it says SF. It could just as easily be FS. That could be my hat, you know. He's going on and on, and I think, oh, this is great. So now we go back to the booth. We go back to 1998, and the booth stone cold quiet, and Tommy's trying to make conversation. I'm trying to referee it. Sabes ain't saying a word. He's just counting minutes. And I don't know why I said it, but out of boredom, I guess I look at Tommy and I says, I heard one time that Sinatra was a Giants fan, and the look on his face was like, what? He says, "Who told you that?" I says, I really can't tell you who told me that. I said, "It'll break your heart." I said, "But the guy that told me, he should know." And he goes, "I don't believe this." And I said, "Let's just let it go." So it goes quiet for another 2 or 3 outs, inning break, and he goes, "Who told you that? This is blasphemous. You're lying to me. Nobody ever told you that. This is a lie. This guy's like a brother to me. We see each other all the time. He's giving him a jacket. He sits right by the door when he, all this. And I'm going, Tommy, I'm just telling you, this is what I heard, and I heard it from a good source. Now he's standing up, and he's like pointing into my shoulder, and he's going, "Tell me who told." And on Sage is looking at me like this might be on national television, right? You know. And so he's going, "Tell me." I said, "Oh, I'll tell you, but you're not going to want to hear this." And he said, "Well, who told you this?" I said, "Frank Sinatra told me this. I had dinner with him." He goes, get out of here. There's a lot of I said, "No, I'm serious." He says, "He told you that because you're with the Giants." I says, "No, I was with the Cubs when he told me this. I had no connection to the Giants." This is bullshit, bullshit. And he says, "Get out, get out, get out of the booth." So we get thrown out of the booth in like the fourth inning. And now we're walking on the concourse behind the press box. Everybody's in the seats watching the game. The press box is quiet. And Sabes looks at me and he goes, "You couldn't have told that story an hour ago?" We were out of the booth. But that was
that's, that's so good. That is so good. You got thrown out of Lasorda's box.
First, tell them Sinatra was a Giants fan. So then years later, I'm working there, and Tommy shows up in my doorway one day, and he's got black slacks on with an orange polo shirt. And he and I had never talked about this day ever, since. And the day, this is probably 10 years later. And I look at him, I go, Tommy, who dressed you today? Frank? And he goes, because he's wearing black and orange. Tommy wearing black and orange. And he goes, I can't believe you're bringing that up. That was the worst game I ever had to watch with you guys. You insulted me with that bullshit story. I said, true story. So anyway, last,
How in the world did Tommy end up wearing black and orange one day? Did
I
he
don't
not
know.
pay attention to what he was putting on?
I said the power must have gone on in your house this morning. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if he hated the Giants. Again, different era, the way you're brought up in the minor leagues,
Yep.
but he played it up. Like that was part of
Oh,
his shtick, coming to Candlestick, waving to the fans, blowing
oh yeah.
kisses, and it was the best. That's what when we talked about, early in the show.
Yep.
It was a show. There was some entertainment
Oh
value
yeah.
involved, and Tommy fed into that. Like he loved that, and it worked. It was like nobody wanted to win more than Tommy, but he was like, you know what? I'm going to give you a show too. It was beautiful.
Yes. Yes. One other thing with Tommy. So I go to the Dodgers. '06 is my first spring. And the '05 team I inherited lost 91 games, believe it or not. The team I inherited was not very good. So it's spring training, and I got my 2002 National League Championship Giants ring. And Billy Miller's on my first team. And he goes, I didn't get a chance to get that, but I got one in Boston, the real one. And then, Nomar's going, what's up with the ring? I said, just calm down. We got to get some momentum here. I got to agitate some guys here. Right. And so I give my 5 minute speech to the team. First day, everybody's there. Pitchers and catchers show up. 5 days later, everybody else is there. So it's that day. The entire clubhouse got 60 guys and whatever. So I'm talking. I'm wearing a Giant ring. And so everybody goes out on the field, first day of workouts, and Tommy comes up to me and he goes, I got to tell you something. He goes, I love you, right? I mean, you're Italian, we're together now in LA, I love you. I says, yeah, yeah. And he goes, but I don't love you enough to have you to have you wear that ring another day. He goes, you wear that Giant ring one more time, I'm going to cut your effing hand off. I said, I was trying to make a point. And he goes, you made the point. No more. That's it.
Oh God, he
You
was a
got time for
beauty.
one more? You got
Yes,
time?
absolutely.
So
Please.
one of my dearest friends in San Francisco, one of the great owners is Larry Nibby. Okay. So now I'm working in LA. And Larry, I still talk to, periodically, and one of my favorite people of all time. And so he says, "Hey, when you guys come to LA," he said, "we have a little Italian men's club that gets together for lunch, once a month or whatever, in a little house, under 280. But as you get past Candlestick and you take the 280 turn going up to the
Hmm.
ball." So he says, "How about you and Tommy and Joe Torre, you know, come out to lunch? I'll get Saves and Boach and somebody else from the Giants, and we'll have a nice time together." So we actually did this at this little house. I could never find it again if I had to. But guys were cooking it was like 11:30 in the morning, cooking like wild. We went over to the Boys and Girls Club, Salesian Boys and Girls Club ahead of this, and we get in the car, we're going, and Joe's looking at me going, "Where are we going?" I said, "Bear with me." And Tommy's going, "What are we doing here? This is the Giants. What are we doing?" You know, we had a phenomenal time. But
That is absolutely
oh,
amazing. Now
I
that did look.
got
What's
to
that,
tell
Ned?
you, I got one more. I got to tell you one more. I'm sorry to
Okay.
hold you.
No, no, no. Hey, I got nothing to do. I feel like I'm keeping you.
So
If you
this
got
will be the
boom,
last
I'm
one.
good.
This will be the last one. I promise. This goes back to you asking about the rivalry. Okay.
Yep.
So this is like maybe 213, 214, somewhere in there. We're going through a tough time, Dodgers. We got a lot of guys hurt. We go into San Francisco and we got one of those uh, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday day games, or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday day game, right? The last day is a day game. And I think we get shut out in all three games. We're terrible. And we're leaving town. We're going back to LA, and we're on 280. And we're 280, and the highways they merge
Yep.
like 2 miles towards SFO from the ballpark. And we're in all this traffic. Now it's rush hour. There's 40,000 people at the ballpark, people getting out of work. We're just jammed. I mean, we're really not moving. And so I get a call from our clubhouse guy, our equipment guy. And he goes, we got a problem. I said, what's the problem? He goes, I see the bus coming down the highway. You're going to see the problem in about 5 minutes. Our truck with all the equipment broke down on 280 at
Oh.
rush hour. And we pull next to it, and they're unloading the truck right on. There's only like 2 lanes, and they got a whole lane blocked, and they're unloading all the Dodger bags, and the fans are driving by, and they're just giving our guys
Mm.
what for. I mean, they're stuck in traffic, but they see all the Dodger bags. They know the truck broke down, and the Giant fans are unmerciless for like an hour. And our fucking guys are going, yeah, okay. They got nowhere to go. They're up on a big bridge. They can't get down. They got to wait for another truck to come. But it was like one of the wildest things I've ever seen. Us breaking down 280. I don't know if that was
uh,
another 5 minutes or not, but it was like
uh,
rivalry deluxe.
you bring it real quick because you bring up, and I just thought of this. You brought up the rivalry, and so Dusty's there,
Yep.
and Tommy's there.
Yeah.
Dusty played for Tommy in Los
Yeah.
Angeles. What was their relationship like?
I think it was good.
Good.
I think Bake, I had him in my class too, the same class Rick Celebrini was in. So, I saw Bake like 3 times in a week this past year. I loved it. I'll never spend enough time with him. Just
Yeah, he's great.
one of the wisest people I've ever been around in life. But we competed. We loved beating the Dodgers. I mean, it was like the homecoming team. We were like, okay, let's go get it. And I think he loved it, and he loved showing the guy that used to manage him, hey, you know what, I can do this too, and he'll end
You
up
know
being.
how good a guy Bake is. Bake's a good guy when people are actually rooting to see the Astros win a World Series, knowing
Oh
that
yeah,
they cheated the last time they won the World Series, and
yes,
that's one of the reasons he was brought in there. And people were
no
still
doubt.
wanted to see the Astros win, not because they wanted to see the Astros win, they wanted to see Dusty win because he deserved a
Absolutely,
chance to be a World Series champion.
absolutely. And it cost me a World Series ring, what the Astros did.
Yep,
But
that's right.
and I won't say the Astros won that other World Series, but I'll say Bake managed a World Series champion, which to me is phenomenal. Love
Well,
Bake.
did you guys have any idea things were going on with the Astros at that time, or was it
You
until
know,
after?
if you go back to um, maybe in Game Five, Game Four, or Game Five, big scoring game, Clayton's pitching, and
I remember that game. You
he's
guys
not
got
getting
off to a decent sized lead.
any swing and miss. And when I see a guy with great talent, whether it was Madison or Clayton or guys in other eras, I'm thinking either they're hurt or either they're tipping pitches because nobody hits Clayton like that.
Yeah.
Little ballpark, small left field, just crushing him. I think he had one swing and miss in how many innings he pitched. And I thought either he's banged up or they got his pitches. But I'm going back and looking at video and I'm thinking, well, I don't see him tipping anything. And so, there was a little bit of, something happened. Something wasn't right. What it was, I don't think anybody knew until everybody knew.
Yeah. And it's really too bad too because that team was talented enough to win
Oh yeah.
without that crap.
Yes.
And they just it just I thought they got off light to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I mean, they got the scorn was there for a few years after that, and they every once in a while you'll still hear the boos or the trash can, but they've kind of let it go by now because all the players that are there, most of them weren't even there at that time. But
Yes.
it was I get it. The baseball it has a certain romance to it and stealing signs and doing stuff that other sports don't do. But when you're using technology and having
Yeah.
a guy beat a trash can who has a video in front, I mean,
That's
come
just
on.
that's just wrong.
No,
Stealing signs part of the game. If you're on second base, or or you're watching a catcher and you're at the third base coach or first base coach, and you're a little bit further down the line because you can see into the catcher signs. This is what led to the the earpiece to
Yep.
to keep that out of it.
Yep.
But to do it the way they did it, that's just not right. Just
Yeah.
not. And
Oh,
I know they won
so
Game 7 on the road in LA, but again, they shouldn't have even been there.
no, you're absolutely right. Again, I'm on to something else that I just thought of. This will be the last thing, unless you have another story. But automatic strike ball is going to be in the All-Star game. They're going to throw,
Yeah.
which I think it's perfect. Like the All-Star game's perfect to use that type of stuff.
Yes.
Doesn't count. Who cares? Let's see what it looks like. And I think it'll be better in terms of balls and strikes. It will be. I mean, it's a
No
computer,
doubt.
but I
No doubt.
still feel like we're missing something. We're turning games into computer projects now. We just like, do we want to take all that away from the game because it's with the replay now? I think it's gotten out of control, and all the technology that they use in the front offices and all these sports. I don't know. They're just it's me again. I know I'm almost
Yeah.
60, but I feel like there's something going to be missing if you take the home plate umpire away. And younger people will say, yeah, they're going to be missing all the bad calls. Yes, I can't argue that. The strike call, ball calls will be better, but there's still something that's going to be missing. And I don't know. How do you see it?
No doubt. Well, no, it was another dynamic of the game. If a guy's squeezing a pitcher and he's got to make a different type of pitch, he's got to come in. He's got to come in instead of pitching on the outside part of the plate or inside part of the plate. So it will be different. But I've gotten to the point too where what, there's nothing I'm going to be able to do about it. So I'm going to have to
Yeah.
figure out a way to accept it. And for those who say, well, it's going to be like 99.9% correct. Well, you know what? I think that's all we ever wanted, but you've taken out the human element, which is part of the game, part of the history of the game. I mean, you can look back on the history of so many and umpires are tremendous. They're the best in the business at what
Yep.
they do. But again, they'll miss a call from time to time. They'll admit it from time to time that they miss something. But it's moving on. We either move with it or we shut the TV off.
It's passing us by. I'm going to continue to watch. So, I just like bitching occasionally, Ned. That's it. It makes me feel better. And then I go back, then I go back to watching the games. And I tell all the people, I go, that's okay. Look, I'm on my porch. I'm going to get this off my chest. And you're going to have your turn at the porch. You might not think you are, but if you're on the lawn right now, when I pass, your generation can come onto the porch, and then the people that are on the sidewalk can go onto the lawn. I go, everybody gets their chance
There's no
at the
doubt.
porch.
There's no doubt.
Everybody gets their chance. So
That's why
damn it,
people love sport.
give me my chance. It's my turn now. Hey Ned, thank you so much. I
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate the time. It's always fun catching up with you talking baseball. Hopefully we can do it maybe toward the end of the season as we get ready
Yeah,
for the playoffs. But again, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
you're welcome. Pleasure. Always good to talk with you.
Thanks, Ned. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
All right, take it easy.